Hello, welcome to this explainer video. In this video, I'll be discussing briefly in details how to start a profitable podcast online. So I'll be talking about 7 steps to starting a profitable podcast online. So if this is your first time of visiting this channel, please subscribe to our channel, and at the end of this video, do well to like, share, and comment on this video. Don't forget to also check the description box to get your free gift, and join our groups and our Telegram groups and our Facebook groups and other informations that will be given to you in the description box. So 7 steps to starting a successful podcast. So the podcast has to do with audio recorded messages. It could be audio recorded discussion. So anything audio that is uploaded online to a server, to a radio, online radio, or to a live streaming audio service is called a podcast. This is the simplest way you can define a podcast. So podcasts are usually audios and not videos. So if you want to start the right podcast, then you need to actually choose the right niche. The first step to having a successful podcast is by choosing the right niche. Now, what does a niche mean? A niche is your area of concentration. So are you a motivational speaker? Are you a motivational podcaster? Are you a religious podcaster? Are you a health podcaster? So whatever you are trying to record, don't record randomly. Record with interest. What do you like doing? What are you going to focus on? So in having a successful podcast, you need to have a niche. And here it says, first and foremost, niche selection is as important as any podcast process. It's hard enough trying to stand out from a sea of podcasters. So you need to find a way to be different. So this has to do with you having an area of concentration. Now, prepare your podcast too. Before you actually start your podcast, there are necessary tools that you need, necessary softwares and other tools, and some of them include a good quality microphone with pop filter. This is what you'll be needing, and you'll be needing audio editing software. You can get a good quality microphone from any of the online stores out there. You can download Audacity. Audacity is a free and it is useful. Then a cover art for your podcast. Cover art has to do with the cover background, the graphic design of your podcast. You can design that using a tool called canva.com online. Then you need an intro, outro music of voiceover. In your podcast, there is need for outro and the intro music of voiceover. So you can go to Fiverr or any freelancer site to pay for a voiceover service provider that will create a voiceover, an intro, or an outro for you for your podcast. So all you need to do is to add it to the beginning of your podcast and at the end of your podcast. Then you need a podcast hosting service provider. Now there are so many podcast hosting service providers out there. Play Store has its own podcast. iPod, that is for iPhone, has its own podcast, and so many of so many podcast hosting services. So all you need to do is to Google them and check out the free ones and the paid ones, and know the one that will be suitable for you. Then plan your podcast episode. Another way to be successful is to plan your podcast episode. Your podcast should be serial, and it should be aligned or arranged serially. The first podcast should leave the listener wanting to listen to the next podcast. Let it not just be a random recording. Then record and edit a few podcasts. While it's possible to launch your show on just a single episode, it's not going to encourage people to subscribe to your show. You can have the best podcast cover art and most persuasively worded description, but if you only have a single episode to your name, then chances are that people aren't going to subscribe. So you need to record not just one episode of your podcast. Your podcast should be in series and should have different episodes so that people will be expecting more. Then sign up for podcast hosting. This is the next fifth step that you need to consider in having a successful podcast. There are reasons why there are companies who exclusively offer podcast hosting. That's because website hosting and podcast hosting are very different. And if you host your podcast file on your web hosting server, you're not going to get all the benefit that comes with dedicated podcast hosting. So it's always preferable for you to get a podcast hosting, or you sign up with one. There are so many podcast hosting services that allows you to buy spaces and then start your podcast, then submit to directories. There are also so many podcast directories that are for different niches. It is important that you submit your podcast to those directories. Then the last but not the least is promote your new show. Learn to promote, learn to run paid traffic, paid adverts to your podcast links. Is going to help you to actually grow your subscribers and listeners. So these are the 7 ways by which you can actually start a successful podcast. This is just an explainer video that I'm using to explain what is posted in this blog, that is my blog. So I want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this explainer video. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, don't forget to check the description box for your free gift and other instructions detailed below. So thank you, and see you in the next video tutorial and explainer video.